Who's your emergency contact? Who should we notify in the case of death? Welcome to the USP, where I spent the last 2+ decades of my life. I'm in Atwater, and we're locked down. But before I get to this story, I just want to clarify something that I said at the end of the last video, where I said, and another thing, we don't steal. My wife laughed at me like, you're in there for bank robbery. So let me clarify what I mean. Like, we don't steal from each other. We don't do grimy shit. You know, if somebody drops a bag off at your spot, you know our people's going to have confidence that that bag is not going to be tampered with. So that's what I mean by that, you know. So on to the story. We're locked down for maybe 3 months. We come out, but we're only in the unit because every time after a lockdown, they try to slowly integrate you back into normal operations. So they might give you an hour out to begin with. Then the next day, next couple of days, they might give you a couple hours out or whatever until it gets back to normal operation. Well, we come out, and after we slowly progress to normal operation, we got locked back down. So the compound was open for a week, and we got locked back down. And for this lockdown, we were literally locked down longer than when the police got killed. So we're like, man, we don't really know what happened because we just barely started moving around and they locked us back down. Well, after they let us back out, again, after this long-ass lockdown, they locked me up for, they come and get me and put me in the SHU for under investigation for attempted introduction. I had shot a letter out to one of my homeboys, but the letter never got to the house. So my dumb ass went and made a card, wrote the message inside the card, and then glue another piece over the card, you know, to seal it. But I didn't have glue, so I used toothpaste because somebody told me that shit works. Anyway, so when it was in the mail, you put it in the mailbox, and every morning around 3 or 4 o'clock, the COs that's working the night shift, they'll go through the mail and they'll read every letter before they put it in the bag and send it out. Well, this one guy got my card, and when he picked it up, the damn thing fell apart. But there was nothing linking me to the card because anybody could send a mail out under my name. But my dumb ass got on the phone and called one of my home, because every phone call is monitored, and called my home and said, hey man, did you get that message? And that was enough for them to tie me to the card. So they came and snatched me up and locked me up for attempted introduction. But it's, I never admit to nothing. So it wasn't a black and white case where they could just write me up and send me to a DHO. They had to try to tie me up to whatever else that was going on in the yard. Because, through my whole bid, I've always made moves. And this was the first time and only time that I ever got myself caught up for something like this. And, because they kick in Atwater, they kick in my door twice a month. When I mean they kick in my door twice a month, I mean every day we're locked down at 4 o'clock count. So twice a month, while we're locked down at 4 o'clock count, 3 to 4 COs will try to run up in my cell to surprise me and try to catch me slipping. And through the whole course of my time, I've never been caught with anything outside of knives. But I've never been caught with no dope, with no work, or none of that shit. Like, yeah, I went to the SHU for wine and stuff, but no one cares about wine, Not until the homie killed the police. Now having wine in Atwater is like having a knife. And if you get caught making wine after what had happened for the first 3 to 4 years, Man, they were trying to bury your ass if you were caught making wine. So anyway, I ended up going to the shoe. And in the shoe is where I run into Lil Man. Lil Man is Crip dude from LA. He's like maybe an inch taller than me, but he used to be yoked up, you know, but when I ran into him in Atwater, he shrunk a little bit, but he's still with, you know, with his program. So you got a bunch of Crips in there, and all the black dudes out of 2B, because I guess that's where the incident happened, was in 2B. I live in 2A. 2B is right across from us. So when we go to rec, I wreck with everybody. I wreck with anybody. I've been in wreck cages with Mexicans. I've been in wreck cages with Serenos. I've been in wreck cages with Bloods, Crips, DC, Black, whatever. I've been in wreck cages with skinheads. I don't duck no wreck. You know what I mean? When they bring me to a wreck cage, they ask me, hey, can you go in there? Yeah, I'm going to go in there. Whatever happens, happens. But I know everybody, and everybody knows me, and I respect everybody, and I'm grateful that everybody has the same respect for me back. So I've never had any issue going into a wreck cage. So we go over there, and sometimes I wreck with Lil Man, the Crips, or you know, whatever blacks that came out of that block, and they were telling me what happened. I tell you, in California, I emphasize this. I'm not that whatever tables, whatever TVs, whether the table's in the unit or in the chow hall, the Crips, it's not the blacks, but it's the Crips and the Serenos have their tables, their TVs, whatever it is they have, from the furthest possible distance that the environment allows. So what happened in 2B was, after they came off a lockdown, they moved the COs came and moved a few things around. And the Crip and the Serenos tables end up being next to each other. So Lil Man approached the white boy. The white boys, whatever his name is, that had the unit for 2B. And he told him, say, hey, can we switch tables with you guys? Since you and the Sereno, because the white boys and the Mexicans, they ride together, you know, because of the relationship between the Black Hand and the brand. So through California, it's almost understood that whites and Mexicans get a ride together against the blacks or against any whatever other race. So when a race riot pops off, it's Serenos and Paisas and white boys against everybody else. You know, because it's Paisas, they ride with the Serenos too. Now, maybe, you know, so everybody has alliances. When one group go, if you have a relationship and affiliation and alliance with them, then it's a must you go too. I mean, if not, why have that affiliation? Why have that alliance? So Lil Man approaches this white boy and tell him, hey man, why don't you switch the tables with us, since you guys will probably feel more comfortable over here anyway because you have a relationship with the Serenos. So he wanted to switch tables with the white boy because the white boy had, I guess, the furthest table. But that dude was like, nah, man, we good. I don't know if he was from California that had the yard for their homies in 2B, or if he's arrogant or ignorant to the politics. So when he brushed Lil Man off, Lil Man's like, all right. Walked away. Went and hollered at his people. And like I say, when it comes to shit like this, Lil Man's a Crip. So all the Crips get a ride. But all those Crips, all those black Crips got friends that are black that might be from the Bay Area, that might be from the Midwest or whatever. And everybody always feels like if you're going up against another race, they don't want to be a bystander. They're going to participate. So end up being all the blacks. They decided, hey, the next day, because the dude that Lil Man hollered at worked in the kitchen. They say, well, the next day, when he comes back from work, from the kitchen, they're going to take off on all the white boys. You can't just take off on one person, especially when you're crossing racial line. If you're black and you're going to hit a white boy and it's not sanctioned, it's not agreed upon that you guys can deal this one-on-one, then you got to hit all the rest of them because his homie's not going to sit around and watch you punish one of theirs. Vice versa. It's understood. So the very next day, they're waiting for the guy to come back from the kitchen. You know? So I'm going to switch off and tell you the story from my friend Dino's perspective. Dino. Forget the one I told you that had got cut up because he was trying to swallow some balloons of heroin in Victorville. Well, he came to Beaumont with me. Then from Beaumont, he came to Atwater with me, and he was in 2B. And like I say, when I go out to wreck, sometimes I wreck with blacks, sometimes I wreck with men, because I'm the only one in the shoe out of my homeboy. I'm the only one to stay in the shoe out of all my homeboys. We got 40 homies on the yard, but I'm always in the shoe by myself or maybe one other homie, but they just come for a visit for, a couple of weeks until they see the disciplinary officer, DHO, and leave. But every time I go back there, they put me under investigation and I stay a minute. So in this particular time, I'm in the cage with Dino. And he's still busted up. He still got bruises on his head, on his face, and some of his head's still swollen and shit. And he was just like, man. I was like, what happened? He said, man, I don't know what happened. I came home from the kitchen one day. As soon as I walked through the unit, I started getting locked up. Locked up is like, they sell you these big ass master locks. So people like to put them in socks, lock in a sock, or they loop their belt around it. And if anybody know what a master lock is, that shit's harder than a rock. And he said 2 or 3 dudes was on top of him, just bam, locking him in the face, in the head, everywhere. But the crazy part was the white boy that blew little man off didn't ever came home that day. He stayed back in the kitchen for whatever reason. So he was the dumbass that got his people caught up, but somehow through pure luck or whatever, he was able to duck the incident. But all the other white boys didn't have no clue. I guess the white boy that was the shot caller didn't share the conversation with the rest of his peoples, because if he did, then his people would have been like, hey, man, maybe you should hear these guys out. Especially if they're white boys from California, they might have told him, hey, this is the politics. They're going to feel some type of way if you don't agree to this. But I guess that white boy that was speaking for them in 2B felt like, didn't want to feel like they were pressing up on him, punking him for the table, and whatever reason. But he didn't understand. I tell you, when you're in a penitentiary, you got to respect the politics. And because he didn't respect the politics, he got all his homeboys in 2B fucked off. Some of them got stabbed up. Some of them got stomped out. The white boys didn't have a chance because they weren't prepared. Because they didn't know about the conversation that was going on. They had no clue. When 3 o'clock came and work call, they call work recall. That means everybody that's working in the kitchen, working in the facilities, out on the compound, everybody got to return back to your unit. When the white boys started coming back in the unit, all the blacks in 2B took off on them. And for that incident, we were locked down longer than when the homies killed the police. And it's understandable because, okay, when the homies killed the police, that was an isolated incident. And the 2 homies that killed the police are locked up, are gone. They're not even in the shoe in Atwater. When you kill police in a facility, we remove you from that facility, one, for your protection, because there's other COs, staffs that might have been friends to the victim or whatever. And like I said, when you're cuffed up, when you're locked up in a cell, when you're shackled, that's when they get tough. And there's been a lot of incident prior, that caused this this rule, this standard, is because a lot of dudes that go back to your shoe cuffed up, they get fucked off by the CO. I've seen it for myself, where dude's shackled and belly chained, and he's just getting punished by the CO. And they come out of the cell high-fiving each other like they did something, But time and time again, I shared with you, when one of their staff members is getting assaulted, getting stabbed up, they always run. It's easy to be tough when you have the numbers and the tools to overpower your opponent. But when you're left with just your nuts, what are you going to do? And I think that's when it determines, who you really are. So I'm in the shoe. And I'm going to be there for a minute. So next episode, I'm going to take you to the stuff that's going on in the shoe. And you might think, hey, it's just a shoe. How much shit can go on? Well, this is my life. And I'm sharing with you, so I'm going to reveal you all the dumb shit I've done too. Like I said, I'm not out here trying to present a persona. I'm just taking you through the course of my time. Welcome to the USP.